Hello, everyone. So, welcome to episode 8 of the Let's Chat About Money podcast series. So, today I'm joined by Rob Newlands, who's a former head teacher and now a financial planner. So, I've been following Rob for a while on Instagram, and I think he's got a really interesting career story. And I also want to find out a bit about some of his money goals, how he budgets, and some of his other goals. So, yeah, thanks for joining, Rob. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Really kind words to get us started off. So thank you for that. Um I think it's the main thing for me is previously being a teacher. So I was a teacher for 10 years. Um Kind of ended up being a head teacher. It's what I always wanted to be, and I was there, did it for 18 or 20 months pretty much. And I went, oh my goodness me, this is not what I thought it was. You go into education to make a difference in people's lives, yet I didn't feel as though I could anymore. And so I decided to leave, and the purpose is still the same because that's what gets you up in the morning, is to make a difference. But now it's helping adults with making good financial choices, which that's I think people can make finances really complicated. And I think if we made it as simple as possible, it is helping people make good choices with their money. And that's to try and make it as simple as possible, I think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I decided to leave teaching and kind of retrain. I'd always said to myself when I was um probably in my mid-20s, I was probably 5 years into teaching. I was like, I'm not going to do this my whole career. I loved personal finance. Always found that really, really interesting. And I actually went to the gym with a financial advisor.
Oh,
So
right.
for me, and he told me to invest. So one thing he said, he was just like, just whatever you do, just invest in some capacity. That's it. Really simple. And so I started investing 21, 22 as soon as I came out of university, as soon as I started teaching, just ended up going to the same gym, got to know him. And it kind of went from there really. And then in COVID, when you had a little bit more time, I looked into the teacher pension and I went, oh my goodness, 68. I can't do this job until I'm 68. I've got to come up with some other solutions. And that's for me when it really started to get real, where I went, right, I need to come up with a plan. So I'm not teaching until I'm 68 because there's absolutely no way you don't have that energy to be able to do that until that age. So, and it kind of went around the rabbit hole from there, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting point about that, the retirement age thing, because I know looking at my workplace pension, you think, oh, I'll just retire early, I'll just take my pension early. But then when you look into it, the amount that the pension reduces by, like for every year, I can't remember what the percentage is, but the penalty that you get for taking that pension early, if you're, my normal pension age is 68. So if I say wanted to retire at 55 and use my workplace pension for that, I'd be really, um, yeah, really being penalized, I guess. So, for me, the motivation behind investing is that thing of how do I bridge that gap between maybe when I want to retire and when I can take the pension that I do have. So,
Yeah,
uh, yeah.
you've hit the nail on the head there. I think it is. I usually try and make it as visual as possible. So when it comes to, you'd have this gap. I mean, we can see it because we've seen each other, but there's this gap here. You've got it here. It's
Mm,
filled by state pension and your whatever pension it is. Then you've got a gap between when you can retire and when you actually can probably afford to. You've got a big gap to fill if you want to, if you've got
yeah,
some options.
yeah.
And it's called the actuarial reduction rate. So I know the teacher pension scheme really quite well because for me, I've got a teacher pension, so I want to try and learn as much about it as possible. I'm not able to give advice on it formally. I think many people are because it's very complex, but
Mm,
the the reduction rate is 4% a year,
wow.
more or less. It does vary depending on individual circumstances, but that's usually the go-to figure there or thereabouts when it comes to reductions each year. So if you think you try and retire 10 years earlier, So from 68 to 58, which is probably going to be when we can retire,
Mm,
realistically,
yeah.
earliest, you're looking at 40% reduction.
Yeah, not yeah, a bit of a shock. Um, and so you've touched on about the motivation for changing careers. D did you have to? I'm imagining being a head teacher, you get paid quite a good salary. Did money impact the decision? Like, I mean, did you have to consider a downshift in your income?
Really good question. And I think we're in a really fortunate position that we have a fixed mortgage. We took a 5-year fixed mortgage back in 2022, end of
Mm,
2022. So for us, mortgage is your biggest expenditure. We knew what it was going to be. So, I was on decent money. It is teaching it is a relatively well-paid job. There's an awful, I probably argue that the responsibility I had as a small head probably wasn't worth the money over just being a normal teacher. Because I didn't get a significantly bigger amount than my teachers did. If you actually look at it. Um, and I went, actually, I know I'm going to take a pay cut here. Um, but we had enough to fall back on, and I count myself very, very fortunate that we had that. So when I say we, it's my wife and I. And actually, she was really, really supportive of the whole transition. And look, you're miserable doing what you're doing. Go and pursue this other thing you're really passionate about, which we've got an opportunity here to do because
yeah.
a lot of people don't have that opportunity where they know they've got a bit of stability. And I know an awful lot of teachers who get caught and trapped because they end up going up the pay scale and it's lifestyle drift. So, what I mean by lifestyle drift for your listeners who may not know is the more money you earn, the more you end up spending, the bigger mortgage that you get. And actually, better off. Yes, you might have nicer, shiny things, but are you time rich in comparison to anything else? And you probably go no. And that's the reason why I was able to make that choice. And so many people get stuck in teaching when they don't like it anymore.
Mm.
So I think I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity to be able to do that because not everyone does.
And how did kind of family and friends sort of take the news that you were changing career? Because I can imagine that people, the status of saying that you're a head teacher, I guess other people feel like, oh wow, you've made it, you're you're at the top there, and then if you suddenly say, oh, I'm actually
That
changing, like how do people perceive it?
that was it's a really good question actually because it being even now a previous head I use it because it gives you that social proof
Mm,
to know that you've been, I suppose, in inverted commas, a pillar of the local community
yeah.
within a local school, and now I'm essentially not anymore. I really did like that. I loved being a leader. I loved watching people kind of grow, become better teachers, because the reason why you become a leader within a school is you get to impact and more children, just not your class, but a whole school. And that was that was a weird thing not having that anymore. But all friends were really supportive. I think a lot of them saw I wasn't myself and hadn't been for a good few years. And teaching takes its toll on people. It really, really does. And people who say it's an easy job, they have absolutely no idea what happens. Hats off to every single teacher out there. It's an incredibly difficult job and it's a vocation, not necessarily a job. You've got to absolutely love what you do and you've got to be in the right environment. Not all schools are the right places to be. And it might take a lot of different opportunities to find a school that fits you. Like I was at school for 6 or 7 years. I never wanted to leave that school. And after I left that school, I probably that's the turning point for me, I think, when it came to teaching, when I realized that I wasn't enjoying it anymore in comparison to what I did. Um, so I think that was kind of a key caveat. But all my friends were really supportive when it came to the change. They'd always known I've always been interested in finances and personal finance and that kind of thing. And they're really keen for it. But I think one of the activities I had to do was to speak to local, friends in my network to see, I'm thinking of doing this. What's your thoughts on it? If down the line you want needed some advice, would you come to me and talk to me about it? Eh, As a general rule, is really positive. In reality, you know, people, if you're new to something, they don't necessarily want to come to you straight away.
Mm,
Because it comes back to that social proof. They want to know that you've been there, done that for a little bit, and you've had the experience under your belt before they necessarily ask you for help, even though they probably should have asked for help straight
yeah.
away.
And um, I'm actually going to apologize here because I realized I'm looking at my draft questions and I'm like, I haven't actually put in the section that I was thinking of putting in, which was asking about your new career as a financial planner. Because what I
Oh
wanted to
yeah, yeah,
ask,
chuck it in, it's fine.
because what I
Just do it.
wanted to ask was kind of what is a financial planner? Because I've been aware of careers in finance, but yeah, I'm not really sure what a
And
financial planner is.
it's a really, really good question because I think there's a lot of, should we say, advisors out there who aren't necessarily financial planning. And and I think there's some people call themselves a planner, some call they're all the same thing ultimately. They provide financial services and financial products. It's a way in which the best analogy for me when it comes to financial planning is we look at your overall circumstances and we go, right, what is going on? And we then go, right, what tools do we have in our toolbox which can help you achieve what you want to achieve? That might be financial independence, that might be retiring early, that might be trying to save for children's future. It could be a whole wealth of things. Is everyone's individual. And once we understand that and we understand our client really well, then we go into the toolbox and go, what financial products or financial
Mm,
solutions do we have within the toolbox which is appropriate for this person? You shouldn't start with the tools if you don't know what the job is, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah,
And that's kind of, from my understanding, the difference, or try, like best way of explaining it, in comparison to a financial planner who figures out what the job is first, over just an advisor who will tell you they've got a really good pension.
yeah,
Actually, the product is the last thing. That's the
yeah,
boring bit that nobody really wants to learn or hear about. Nobody wants to hear me talk about the risk reward of this particular portfolio or its historic performance or anything like that, or what protection that they need. Nobody cares about that. If I actually go, the reason I'm recommending this is because you told me that you wanted this, and that's the tool to get there. And then along intertwined with that is also cash flow planning. So I use a tool called Voyant. So it's a fantastic tool. So what that does is we take all the information from clients, we put it into a really keen, really brilliant bit of software, and we go, right, what's it kind of forecasts the future based on lots of assumptions, which we can control the assumptions. Um, we can look at when it comes to pension pots, ISAs, bonds, trusts, you name it, we can put it in there. When it comes to you want to buy a car for this amount in 5 years' time, great. What impact does that have in your retirement plan? Oh, look, you're going to have to put away an extra 200 quid more a month for that to be a reality for you to retire at that date and have your car. Well, that's me just giving an example. But you can see how actually we can use that to really tailor it individually for what people want to try and do because everyone's wants different things. And that's the
mm,
important bit is understanding what clients want, not necessarily giving them a solution before you understand it.
yeah. And is there a particular type of customer that you look for, or is it sort of does it range? Could it be anyone like some people who've got an idea about what the retirement might look like, or someone who doesn't have a clue but just knows that they want to retire at a certain age, say?
It's a really good question because and it's a difficult one to answer, I suppose, because for me, I just want to help as many people as I can when it comes to that. And at the end of the day, it is a business, and it's got to be profitable to put it bluntly, because otherwise everything's a business. If it's not going to be profitable, there's no point doing it, and then
Yeah.
nobody wins. Um, but at the flip side is I don't I'm not particularly fussed who it is. If they want help, I'm more than happy to go, right, let's see if we can come up with a plan. I am working with a fair few head teachers actually, just because I think I can empathize with the challenges that they have. And I have worked with other teachers as well when it comes to kind of options moving forward. And then a lot with business owners too. So that's self-employed people, um, that type of thing. Usually is more who we work with.
Yeah. And so in terms of you training as a financial planner, does that mean that you've had to do qualifications to do that? I mean, what does that look
Yeah.
like?
So I have a diploma in regulated financial planning. So with a CII, that is just one. There's a multiple different kind of examining bodies you can use, I suppose. So there's a CII, so that's the Chartered Insurance Institute. There's a CISI, and there's a few others as well. I don't know them particularly because I've just the exams I've done are with the CII. So the six exams to do your level four, which is your diploma. So I did two exams while I was finishing teaching, which you had to do prior to starting your training. Then I had 3 months of just self-study at home. So that was 1 month, one exam, another month another exam, the third month another exam. So that by that point I'd done five, and then I had 3 months more or less of induction, I suppose. And then after that, sorry if you can hear my dog barking, she's going a
I
bit
can't.
bonkers downstairs. And then after that, it was you can get started and get advising now. So, and you have to then pass the final exam. So that's RO6, which is more or less the practical exam to know
Hmm.
that you know what you're doing within a year of you doing the others. So I was lucky. I managed to pass that first time, that one as well. So that was back in July. I think it was back in July I did it. Yeah, and it's yeah, past that. So I'm all ahead at the moment. And when it comes to qualifications with financial advice, so those teachers, you have something called a newly qualified teacher, or the ECT they're called now, something different. And that's essentially what I'm in. So I'm under supervision until at which point I then get something called qualified advisor status, where I don't need to have someone checking every single one of my cases anymore. So I'm not that far away from that now. So hopefully I'll get that within the next couple of months is the plan. Fingers
Wow.
crossed.
Wow, no, that's brilliant. And I've seen on your Instagram, you post a couple of times about the flexibility you appreciate now of being able to take annual leave when you want rather than
Yeah.
being constrained towards like school holidays and so on. Can you say a little bit about that?
Great question. Again, you're doing a grand job here. Well done. And I think people ask me that all the time. So they say, "Oh, don't you miss teaching? Don't you miss the holidays?" And I go, "Actually, no, not in the slightest. Yes, I have a lot less time off, but I don't need the time off anymore. In teaching, you needed it to recover,
Mm,
and you didn't do necessarily do as much with it as you should have done. Now, when I take time off, I go away and do the one thing which for me is incredibly important for me and my wife is that's to go traveling and visit the world. And we've been on one holiday since 2020. And that to us now is super important. So every single time we have a holiday or time off work, we are going away and doing things which I've not been able to do because I've been teaching the last 10 years. So that's like a massive epiphany is leaving teaching is giving that flexibility and freedom to control my diary, choose when I want to go away, all those type of things I never had before. So I don't miss the holidays in the slightest.
yeah. I mean, I personally couldn't imagine not being able to, like, I don't know, say it's to getting into December now, sometimes you get coughs and colds and stuff, and sometimes you're not unwell to take time off, but sometimes you just want a day off to, I don't know, lounge about, you just want to put in a Friday off. I couldn't imagine not having
Yeah,
the flexibility to do that and just be all out, kind of burnt out by the end, and then you've only got 2 weeks off and
yeah,
back
and
to the grind in January.
that's it. And these holiday this term is like the first from September to end of December. is like the longest period of time. You have 1 week off, and most terms are like 7.5 weeks,
Mm.
which are it's an extraordinarily long time in education.
And yeah, so thinking about money, you mentioned that in terms of exposure, kind of career in finance, yeah, you had that conversation with the person at the gym. But
Yeah.
did your interest in money start earlier than that? You know, how were you with money when you were growing up? Did you
So
always interested in it?
I think a lot of people's perception of money and kind of thoughts on money all come from parents and how you've been brought up. Exactly the same with me. So my mum was an account, not an accountant, but a bookkeeper,
Hmm.
and so had always been look was aware of money, looked at it and went, right, what can we spend, what can't we spend, all this type of thing. And I grew up around that, so I'd always been a saver, always been a saver. Um, and that was the thing, a saver, as in a bank account saver,
Mm,
because that's what my parents did,
yeah,
not necessarily what should be the right financial choice now when it comes to that long-term time horizon. But that is your understanding of money comes from your parents a lot of the time because that's what worked for them and that's what got them into a certain position, which they may or may not be happy with. And then you follow that too. But actually, in hindsight, I should have educated. I wish I'd educated myself sooner because I would have been in a much better financial position now had I have
yeah,
done that. But I didn't know, and really until that COVID 2020, when I went down the rabbit hole, did I realize about all this stuff.
yeah,
Where I started investing but didn't really know much at all. I just chucked some money out monthly and left it. To then really going, wow, okay, there's a lot of things you can do here, which can make a really big difference in your lives. It just gives you
yeah.
more options.
Yeah, it is interesting when you think about how when you realize how much of your understanding of money comes from your parents and your upbringing. Because I know I was having a conversation with um a friend it was maybe a couple of months ago now, and they were saying, you know, they've got a big mortgage, got a nice house, and they're like, yeah, but my house is my pension, and I'm like, but what does that mean? And where'd you come from? And they're like, oh no, but like, you know, they were saying their parents have always had a big house, and that's a sort of idea that their parents have passed on to them. But I'm saying, yeah, but how are you going to draw money from your house when you want to retire? Like, are you going to sell the house? And they're thinking, well, the same. Well, no, because I've spent years paying off this mortgage, and I've done up the house how I like. So,
Yeah.
I don't really want to downsize. And I'm like, and then they were starting to click, like thinking, well, actually, how is this house going to be my pension? But it was just that thought had been passed on from their parents, so that was their view of how to save for the future. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is always the case. So prime example I come across is overpaying mortgage. So I know that you document that's what you're doing at the moment. And for my parents' generation, that by far what back then was possibly, I don't know because I wasn't around then, was probably the best decision because their interest rates are 15%.
Yeah.
You couldn't get a return, which is going to be 15%. So actually, back then, absolutely right call. And then you're thinking now, interest rates have gone up now, so it's not as beneficial as it once when it was interest rates are so low. Actually, people are going, should you? There's other options, but it's individual. So some people want their car, want their castle, want their home, and go, it gives me peace of mind. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Whatever helps you sleep better at night, because everyone is individual, go with that. No problem with that. It's still a good choice. But if you're thinking, what can I do to absolutely make them the best return from everything, there are some other options out there, but it's not
Yeah.
for everyone. You've got
Yeah.
to be the right type of investor, right type of person, and be strict
Yeah. I,
because,
I think that is a good point because I know myself, me overpaying the mortgage, where's that come from? Well, that's come from my parents who are like, you don't want any debt, you don't want to, but really, like that is it's better than having parents who really loved having debt and credit cards and stuff because I might
yeah,
have then went the other way. But at the same time, my dad, for example, he only knew about, well, he knew about investing, but he only knew about the benefits when he actually saw financial advisor when he was just before he turned 50, and they were like, "Oh, start a SIP," and he started the SIP. Like a is a self-invested personal pension, private
Yeah,
pension,
so
personal
yeah,
pension. He started that, and then over the 10 years that he was contributing to it, even though it was only 10 years, he ended up building up like a good enough pot that when he got to 60, he could think, actually, I'm going to retire and use my SIP money to like bridge the gap between
until
when
state
I
pension.
stay pension and it's like,
Yeah,
so then when and I was a teenager probably when he was like that age, and when he used to tell me about that, and I was like, wow, so your money's grown by this much and you're only putting in this much, and this is how much, the government's contributing and how much the investments
yeah,
are growing by.
that's
And
it.
it really opened my eyes. And then I was like, wow, I really need to start thinking about investing as well. But even now I find myself hot, like it's hard to pull away from the safe overpayments and move towards the riskier stuff, even though I know what I invest in. I'm not a financial advisor, but it's not necessarily, I'm not investing in just one stock. I am investing in a broad range, so it's not as
Yeah.
risky as what people may think investments are risky for.
And that this is it's such an important conversation because there's a lot of stuff out there when it comes to financial podcasts, videos out there when it comes to do own your own house or don't own your own house. Renting is
Yeah,
better. Don't buy your own place. You're buying a liability. All that kind of stuff. Ultimately, it's personal preference and what you're comfortable with and what you're happy with, which is what works for individual people. So the thing is particularly when it comes to investing instead of overpaying mortgage, you've got to be incredibly strict with yourself because when you overpay a mortgage, you can't, the liquidity is locked. You pay it
yeah,
off, you reduce your interest, the amount of interest you pay down the line. You can't touch that. However, if it's invested, say, for example, use an ISA, that's what most people should be using in theory, when it comes to that, because it's not taxable within the ISA, that's accessible. So the problem is, if you're not strict and people decide, oh, I'll just dip into that ISA to pay for my holiday or pay a car, and it wasn't, if they set themselves, my purpose is paying into this rather than the mortgage, and to use that to pay off the mortgage, it's not going to work. And that's
yeah,
where it's got to be individual, where you're going, no, I know this bit is going to be for that in the future. I don't touch it. So it's got
yeah.
to be for the right person. And
And
that's,
I think that is a really interesting point because I mean I do document my journey on YouTube about mortgage overpayments, and without fail on every single video I get a comment from someone saying, but you can get an easy access bank account that's more than your mortgage rate. So why aren't you just sticking it in there and then paying it off a lump sum like at the end of your fix? And I'm like, well, the reason for that is I know my own behavior, and I know if I have money sitting in an easy access account, then there'll be a reason for us to spend that
yeah,
money.
that's it.
Whereas like when I overpay my mortgage, it's a good thing for me that I'm not going to spend it, but that's locked away. But also the other side of the coin is if my boiler breaks or something, I can't access that money. So I've got to be mindful that I need some easy access money for like
And that's
emergency fund. Yeah.
and this is the thing, and that's why, financial education online is brilliant. And I think it's just making people aware of things which they didn't necessarily know, but listening it to it verbatim and then following it blindly, you may not know the implications, or it may not be the right option for you. And that's where I think a lot of people don't necessarily know what financial advisors or financial planners actually do when it comes to that kind of stuff. Is that's where I think you give the added value, is you have these conversations and you go, right, this is the pro, this is the cons. What are your thoughts on this? Can you be strict enough or can't you? And it's a lot of our role is coaching because we work with people on a really long-term basis. So it's coaching.
Mm,
Like when it comes to one of the slides I use as part of my review meetings, I always go through behavior. So emotional investing. So, when you markets go up, it's euphoric and you're going, oh my goodness, look at the money I've made. And you're talking about it and somebody down the pub hears you and you go, oh, I'll go and buy some of that. That's probably the highest risk doing that then, because things will mean revert or they'll come back down, and then people will panic and sell. They're the people who lose out
mm,
because they don't understand how. it should be a long-term time horizon. And actually, when people are fearful, that's probably the time where we as advisors or as planners should have a phone call from clients going, can I invest more money? Because I know that it's a good opportunity when markets are down, when people are panicking. As long as you're investing in the right stuff,
Yeah.
that's great. But we don't. We have phone calls panicking. And that tells me we need to do a little bit more work when it comes to coaching clients, when it comes to, doesn't matter what happens today. You don't need it for 10, 20 years, which we spoke about when we set everything up.
Mm,
We're doing it for this and we're doing it for this reason. And then it's getting that buy-in, but also the coaching.
yeah.
I have heard of some people called financial coaches these days. I don't know if you
Yeah.
have you seen that at all?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I can imagine it must be reassuring for people if they've got that relationship with a financial planner, and then if they've got money invested, and then say the markets turn, for to have that conversation, because I think a lot of the time people, as you say, they sell at the wrong time, and it's probably because they haven't got that ear to, to for the for to listen, like for them for to listen to them, when they just want reassurance that they can ride it out and not to
that's it.
panic sell. And yeah.
And it's that alone is added value. If I can make someone not sell when they shouldn't, that is it comes back to what we said right at the start. It's helping people make good choices with their money. And that's the most important bit. And if that's part of it, as coaching is part of it, or suggesting where it should be invested, what the plan is going forward, which tool do we need in our tool out of the toolbox? That's what's really important.
And thinking about financial education, have you got any tips for how people can financially educate themselves? So if there's someone listening to this podcast who wants to make a start in terms of upskilling themselves, where can they go, or what can they do?
Shameless plug here. Follow me on Instagram. I joke. It's tongue in cheek, but I try to. I mean, it is quite difficult managing. Trying to do that as well as working is really difficult. So I try to do everything I can. I think the main thing is just surround yourself by that kind of content. If there'll be two people, there'll be two camps. There'll be one person who probably more like yourself is really keen to learn it themselves and do this journey on their own and be and upskilling themselves. Brilliant. Hats off to you. Fantastic. But I think what's important is make sure you make informed decisions. Make sure you go, I'm happy with this. I know how this works, and brilliant. That's one side of things. Um, you know, Martin Lewis website, there's loads of good info on there. It is I often when it comes to looking at like bank accounts and high interest rate, I'll go have a look on that. I can't recommend any banks or anything like that. Look on there for the best rates. Is often usually a good port of call. I mean, again, don't take everything verbatim because it may not be appropriate to you, all that kind of stuff. Um, and I think I've started listening to this other podcast now. It's more for financial advisors, but it is really good. So it's called Trap. So that's called the Real Advisor Podcast.
Mm.
Is really good. So I've been listening to them for probably a couple of months, but I've actually week before last I started listening to it all the way through. If you're Googling it, it is like a orange background. There's four advisors who set up different advisory firms, either a one-man band or a big firm. And then also I think it's Meaningful Money podcast. I think the chap is also down here. I think he's actually in Penzance. I think. I've
Yes,
never actually run into
I
him yet. I
I
do want to.
follow him on YouTube as well. I think I watch his videos on YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's
Um.
got loads of good stuff. But that's where I started. Started listening to that podcast. I mean, way back after I started learning about my pension, and I went, "This is amazing. Why doesn't everyone know this?"
Mm,
So I'd probably start there if you want to do it yourself. If you start listening to this, consuming this content, you're going, "Whoa, no, I don't understand." That's where you probably you either got to keep learning or go and ask someone. So,
yeah.
a lot of clients that I have, it is either they find it really difficult or they don't or they don't want to and they're not bothered. And they just go, actually, I just want someone I trust to help me make those choices and do it for me. Great. Some people are like that, and some people want to do it themselves, and that's absolutely fine. It's
Mm.
whatever works for you.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of think of it like, for money stuff, I'm really interested in it. I'll read books on it and so on. But
Yeah.
actually, if it comes to, I don't know, DIY or something in the property, um,
Yeah.
I think actually I'm not in, that's not my interest. So I'm happy to ring someone who's going to organize all those jobs or can give us advice about what to do on things because I've got no interest in doing that
Yeah.
myself. And I guess people will, as you say, fall into one of the two camps. Yeah.
So I was just looking at my bookshelf for recommend because I try and do a recommended read. I've been a bit slack on it, I will admit, over the over the last month or so, because I've been trying to get all my reels out, my protection series. But a couple of books I've just got in front of me here. Psychology of Money, by Morgan Housel. I think that's how you say it. It is a really good book, fantastic book. Well worth reading if you're interested. Um, another book too, which is more planning-esque, is something called is this. So it's called Enough by Paul Armisen. He is a financial advisor or a financial planner. He kind of started the financial planning, cash flow modeling in comparison to just selling a product or selling a
Oh,
pension or whatever it is. Again, it asks the question, what is enough? So what is the number? What is your number? What number would you need to be financially independent and never have to worry about money again? And it was interesting is what we mentioned earlier about financial drift. If people's number will always change because
mm,
they'll go, oh, I've hit this number, I'll try and get to here. Well, no, you don't
yeah,
need it. You told me that this is the life you wanted. You don't need any more. What's the point?
yeah,
You've got one life. It's not a rehearsal. That's what he says in his book. Life's not a rehearsal.
yeah.
And speaking of that, this book also, I know you can't see it, those of you listening,
Yeah,
it's called Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. These, I think all of these have been a recommended read on my Instagram, actually.
yeah,
I absolutely love this one, Die with Zero. It does speak to the enough bit as well. And it speaks about, you don't want to be the richest person in the graveyard. Um, and actually, when it comes to gifting, if you're slightly older, is and you go, I'm going to leave my money to my children when I die. Okay, great. But do you get anything, any value from that at all? No, none,
yeah,
nada, nothing, nothing. What's the point? Give it to them sooner when you can either experience it with them or do something with them, and then you can look back in the future, look back and go, "Oh, glad I did that. I'm glad I spent that money." Um, so he speaks to something called a memory dividend. So a dividend is when you get paid. Um, an amount of money for being a shareholder in a company. So, and a memory dividend is you do something, an experience or something or whatever it might be, and then in the future you reminisce about it. That feeling, that nice feeling inside when you think about an amazing time that you had. That's kind of the idea of a memory dividend. So, the prime example that he said, and interesting, I had a client who literally have done this, which is incredible, is he had a really big birthday part, like a big birthday coming up, and he went,
mm,
I want to take all my family on a massive holiday and pay for it myself. He was like, I'm not going to spend all this money. And if I don't do this now, I don't think I'm going to have it do it again. So he brought his entire extended family all onto like an all-exclusive resort, all paid, he paid for everything. So it had family, children, uncle, everyone to come and celebrate his 40th birthday. And he's like, I spent an absolute fortune and it hurt at the time, but I'm so glad I spent the money because there's absolutely no way that we could do it now based on where everyone's lives are. And I helped a client do that, which
wow,
like for me was brilliant because I spoke to him about this concept and he went, yeah. So he inherited some money and he's taken his four children um, along with their children, so his grandchildren and spouses, going on a big family holiday, which he's covering costs of. To I think you're going to the Canary Islands or something. So
wow.
incredible, and it's those types of things which this talks about. So Die with Zero, highly recommend it.
Yeah, I've also read Die with Zero and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I think the other thing I liked that I talked about was about thinking about there's only certain points in your life where you can do certain things. So it was saying, some people put off travel until they retire, but then you don't actually realize that the types of holidays that you might want to go on when you retire are different to the holidays that you'll be able to do on your 30s or 40s. So if you've got ambitions to go hiking or, do anything that's strenuous, can you guarantee that you're gonna have the health to do that when you're in your 60s? And, you might be comfortable staying in a hostel in your 20s or 30s, but actually, would you really be doing that when you're 60 or 70? So, and that was really useful for me because sometimes I go on holiday every year, but sometimes I'm in that mindset, oh, I'll put off a big trip until later down the line. But yeah, it's that thing of actually what happens if your health declines and you're not able to do those big trips.
Yeah, th those who are listening, you can't see me nodding along. Absolutely. And when it comes back to why I love what I do now, is that freedom. That is also, my wife has read this too. And for us, we're like, we are going to now, we're going to focus, this is our priority now, is doing the things we want to do now, which we know are probably not going to want to do in 10 years' time, but regret not doing.
Yeah.
So for me, the biggest example of a thing which I can't do now, which I wish I'd have done, was for me a ski season.
Mm,
So I've always skied. I skied every year up until COVID. I've not been back since I've been go. I'm actually going in January, the first time ever in the last
right.
15 since I've been in education or whatever it is, which is because I've always had to go during the holidays. Um, and I never went on one, and I really regret not doing it. So for me, that's like a personal experience of I wish I'd have done something, but at the time, I didn't think it was a priority, but I should have done it. And you don't necessarily know that until it's too late. And, it's a prime example for me why I want to do the things now rather than waiting.
Yeah. And thinking about your personal finance, I mean, how do you manage your money? I mean, is there any tips or things that you want to share? Like, do you follow a particular um, kind of split of your money, percentage day-to-day living, percentage savings, anything like that that you'd share?
To put it bluntly, not at the minute, no, because we've had to be really tight because of taking the pay cut. It has been really tight, and I have just had to put everything off, to be fair, because coming back to that book is we've still tried to go away,
Mm,
and we went, right, well, we're going to have to make sacrifice if we want to keep doing that, which is our number one priority. We're going to have to make sacrifices when it comes to other things, which we'll just put off. Um, and I think that's the main thing. And it's just some people will stick their head in the sand. Um, some people will know to the pence and pennies what they've spent. It's whatever works for you. I think as long as you have a vague, I would say an idea that as long as you're not spending more than you earn and you know that and you can comfortably think that's the case, then you're probably okay. I mean, I wouldn't worry about I wouldn't necessarily worry about the small things, but that's me personally. Um, as long as you know you're not spending above your means, you don't necessarily. I wouldn't say you necessarily need to, but some people want to, and some people who do spend above their means probably need to try and go, oh, I'm spending how much on this per month?
yeah,
Um, I've always been quite strict, so we've always been we've always been savers as a general rule rather than spenders. But I am swaying now because of that book,
mm,
because you don't know what's around the corner, you don't know what's going to happen. And actually, if I didn't do these things, I'd regret it in the future. And I think so there's got to be a balance of saving and spending.
yeah.
I was definitely too much of a saver in comparison to now. And I think yeah, I think that's really important. You got to know what you want to try and do.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would have liked to have done if I had the money at the time, and maybe it links in with that point you said about the saying about gifting and die with zero. Like if my parents had say thought actually might gift you money earlier on, like I would have liked to have traveled before starting full time work because
Yeah.
once you start full time work, unless you take a career break, which you can do, but it's then you're used to the money, you have to be in the routine. You get, I don't know, started with 23 days holiday a year. You know, actually, there was a few people who I went to university with who had the means to go traveling for 4 months before they started full-time work, and actually they got a lot of benefit from that, and they managed to pack a lot in, and I didn't. And now looking back, I'm thinking actually would have, if I'd had the means to do that, it would have been really beneficial because I wouldn't
Yeah.
have had the want as much to to go to all these places if I'd sort of satisfied a bit of that craving earlier on in life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, really, really valid point. Really important.
So do you have any long-term financial goals that you want to chat about? Thinking on, is it moving house? Is it retirement? I mean, you mentioned travel, anything like that?
I think for us, the main thing, particularly, we don't have children. So for us, when it comes to that, is now is the time we've got to do these things before we think about having family, because you're not going to be able to do those anymore because they are
Mm.
kids are slight high. Lots of my friends have now got kids, multiple children, and I'm going, oh my goodness, I'm not ready for that. No, thank you. There's too many things that we want to do before that's the case. I think for us, um, we don't want to move. We're happy where we are now. Um, it is just travel, and then giving as many options when it comes to retirement as possible. So, and also it's being time rich. So I can't remember what books they speak about being time rich. So I think actually it is mentioned. I keep rating about this, but it's brilliant. So he speaks about outsourcing the things you don't like doing.
Mm.
That was also a game changer. So for me, I'm going, when we do have the money, what things can I outsource which I don't enjoy doing? Because it gives me back my time to do the things that I want to do.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still working, and it means I might need to work for longer, but I love what I do now. So why I don't want to rush there. I'll get there eventually because I'll plan myself. But actually it gives me more time back now so I can do this and sustain this for longer and still do what I want and have
Y-
that, fulfilling life, I suppose. I can't remember. There are lots of other podcasts I've listened to or books which have mentioned it.
Yeah. I mean, I do like that concept because I've read about that before. Because before, I've my parents, for example, if they hear about anyone who's got a cleaner, they're like, why do you pay for a cleaner? You can just do it yourself. But actually, for me, I'm like, actually, if I've only got 2 days off in the weekend and I can have the house cleaned in, and the professionals come and they can clean it in an hour or 2 hours, that will probably what I can do in 4 hours. That's saving me four
Yeah.
hours of my
That
relaxed
that is
time.
literally it.
Yeah.
That is one of the goals, I think, in the next
Mm.
12 months is to be able to have someone come and clean the house because it will give us 2, 4 hours
Yeah.
to do the things that we want to do. Like, and I think my parents' generation really struggle with that. When I've spoken to them about that,
Mm.
they're like, "What? Why do you want to pay that? Why do you want to pay that? I get 4 hours back of my time." All my parents do is moan about having to clean the
Yeah.
house. I'm going, why don't you pay someone to clean it? Because then you get to do what you want to do with your time, which for my parents is spend time with horses. I mean, I don't understand that at all. I'd call that another chore, but it's whatever gives people fulfillment. And I think that I think that is being much more widely, people are more aware of that now than they ever were before. That was never a thing when it was buying back time, this kind of thing. But definitely the last couple of years, I've seen way more about it.
Yeah. And moving on to some of the things I've noticed on your Instagram. So one of the things that I notice on your predominantly on your stories is about your morning routine, which is like reading and going to the gym. So how long have you been doing this, and have you noticed any benefits from
So
doing it?
I've been training at the gym since I was 17, 18. I did sport and exercise science in university, so it's been a massive part of my life. Even through my entire career with teaching, people tell you don't have time for gym. What I say is, make time for gym. People who say they don't have time, it's because either they don't want to do it or they're looking for an excuse. Some people won't like that, but I think that's true. And the thing is that the funny thing is that sometimes I say it, I'm like, you can't say that, Rob. That's just an excuse. What are you doing? Um, so for me, that makes a world of difference. I've tried training in the evening, tried training in the morning. I used to always train in the evening. Um, but the older I've got, the more I've realized I really like training in the morning. You get out of the way, get all the things that are non-negotiables out of the way first thing, because then it means it sets you up in such a good place for the day because you already, before you even got to work, you feel as though your day's been successful. Been for a dog walk, read a book, been to the gym, and now I'm on the way to work, listening to a podcast or something or other. Great. And now, what I will say is it's okay to sometimes not stick to that completely. I've been a bit haphazard the last month or so when it comes to reading in the morning. I've not been as good. Um, but as long as you're aware of that and you know, I think that's okay. You can't be perfect all the time. I think people out there who say I do this every day without religiously, I mean, you've got the David Goggins and stuff. I genuinely believe him, but I'm sure there's some people who aren't perfect, and I think it's important for people to know it's okay not to do it all the time, as long as you. For me, gym always the thing that slips off in the mornings for me is the reading.
Mm.
I've not been as strict with that for the last month or so, but I go through phases. Sometimes it's like 6, 8 weeks, non every single day, and now I do it like 4 or 5 times a week, and then sometimes it's going to be three too. But and that is one thing I do need to. You're going to have to hold me to account next time you go to Instagram. You're going to have to message me and tell me have you read this.
Uh,
I say I joke about that. That's actually genuinely really. There's a lot of research out there which speaks about also being. The other reason I post it is because it tries to make me hold myself to account
mm.
a bit. And also, when you have other people holding yourself to account when it comes to have you done this, you go, oh, I need to do it for them, not necessarily for me. It gives you more of a motivation to do things. So if you can remind me if I've been slack, please message me.
Did I did see, and I think I commented that you read Dark Matter by Blake Crouch recently, didn't you? Because that's one of my favorite books. I really like
What a
Blake
book.
Crouch. Yeah. I haven't seen the TV show yet.
I
I haven't
started it
seen.
last night,
All
actually.
right.
I
Yeah.
literally started it last night. It's really good. We've watched an episode and a half. It is really so far very similar to the book. It is fantastic, but on that is the best book I've ever read. Um, it is my favorite. I have to say I'm reading the Red Rising series at the moment, which Chris Williamson recommended. He's got fantastic reading lists, by the way.
All
That's
right.
where I get quite a few of my reads from. Um, and yeah, the Red Rising series, I'm on book 3 out of 5. That's what I'm reading in the evenings. So I do read every day, but I've not been doing as much non-fiction, which is what I read in the mornings. So I always read before bed. I'm really strict with that when it comes to no phones. Makes such a big difference. Blue light, impact that has on your circadian rhythm, quality of sleep, all that kind of stuff. I love all this stuff as well. Um, and I think that that series is fantastic as well. I highly recommend it. It's one of the books where usually I'm happy to go to bed and go to sleep because I'm tired. I look at the clock. I'm like, oh, I need to go to sleep now.
Yeah. I'll have to have a
Oh,
look.
brilliant!
I haven't read that one before.
Definitely get it. I've got it on Kindle, so it's yeah, well worth it.
And so as I mentioned, you're active on Instagram. So and you mentioned you're doing financial education videos on there. So what are your plans with the platform?
So I think it's just to try and keep up as much as I can when it comes to reels. And I'm not. I've never been big on social media. I've never posted. I've tried to push myself outside my comfort zone when it comes to this kind of thing and getting in front of the camera when it comes to being comfortable, being uncomfortable. There's a Jimmy Carr podcast again with Chris Williamson, and there's some really there's an amazing quote about there being feeling imposter syndrome over this 18 months, and if you're not feeling it, you're not pushing yourself to
Mm.
be better. And I think that was really it's a really important point, and I think I'm going right. This is the area which I think I can add value. I mean, I've only got 130 subscribe followers or something. Like even my personal account that I never post has got 110. I'm going, nobody wants to watch what I'm doing. Um, but the thing is, it comes with consistency, it comes with time, and I think I'm gonna try. I bought myself a gimbal, which is really cool actually, which I used over the weekend just to do a little video, and I took the dog for a walk. Um, and I want to try and use some more content out and about around Cornwall rather than just filming here where I am here.
Yeah.
It's really boring. I'm starting to understand a bit more about engagement when it comes to the algorithm. What can I do? So if you look at my early videos compared to what I'm posting now, they're very different when it comes to the setup. Now, because we're working in a regulated um, area, I've got to be very careful what I do and don't say on Reels. So I do have to go through to make sure I'm not saying things I shouldn't be saying. When
Yeah.
I say that, it's very careful with the wording. I can't say things like it, you should be doing this
Hmm.
because people may see it as advice when it's not.
Yeah.
It's just people are perceive it that way. It is this could be an option for you. So I have to there I'm now going to go down the lines of I'm going to fully script them so that I know what I'm going to say. I mean, I usually do. There's like points that I'm going to go
Yeah.
through, but it's not word for word, and I'll usually kind of get there on my own. I'm quite good at talking, so but I think that's what I'm going to try and do is keep going with the stories because I think that's where I get lots of engagement actually is on my stories, um, and then just continue with my protection series. I got two more videos to come out, which are filmed and ready, so that will come out on Friday. Um, and then I've got another one following week, and then I haven't got any more. I need to start planning for some more now. But now I've got some other kit. I've got some plans for what things people want to cover, and it's also I'm trying to get engagement and ask what people want to see or ask about. But people are a bit. I have to kind of push them when it comes to answering my posts, or
Mm.
answering my questions and stuff on my story. But we'll get there.
Yeah.
Just
And
takes time.
have you considered doing anything on YouTube, or are you just sticking with Instagram?
No, I think I think I prefer shorter form content. I think um I don't know why actually. I just that's what I'm kind of more keen for. I think it's because it's easier to get out more
Yeah. I
rather
get,
than not as
yeah.
regularly.
Yeah. And I guess the way with Instagram, I guess people, if you're trying to target people who are maybe considering things with finances but aren't seeking it out themselves loads. It's probably easier for them to stumble across things on Instagram than I guess YouTube. If you're looking at the long form content, if you're going to sit to finance stuff on YouTube, you're probably the kind of person who's interested enough to be searching that out.
Yeah.
Yeah, whereas the Instagram algorithm, I guess it just things pop up and yeah, you
And
might
that
end.
and that's
Yeah.
trying to get that hook in the first few seconds is so crucial for Reels, which is where you get all my interactions are on Reels mainly.
Mm,
So that's probably what I'll focus on. But try and vary up where I'm filming, cuts between different angles, all those types of things to try and make video more engaging than just me sat in this chair.
yeah. Yeah. Cool. So no, it's been a really good chat. So before we finish, have you got any personal goals that you want to talk about that you've got on the horizon?
I say, I mean, I used to be really good at this. I used to sit down, so I have a gratitude journal that I do every day, and I used to write in that at the start of the year what I wanted my yearly goals to be.
Hmm.
And to be fair, this year I've not done that. So, I think just be able to, I think it's more having the realization of what I want to try and do when it comes for us, my wife and I, is go away on these trips and holidays. That for me, that's the most important thing for us at the moment, is to make sure that we're prioritizing.
Yeah,
That's the key bit. So I think it's more plan as many trips as possible as we can next year, would probably be say that. And probably that's probably my goal for next year as well, I imagine.
yeah. That's that's a nice note to end on. So yeah, so thanks for being a guest today. I'll put the link to your Instagram in the description box of the video down below. And
Uh,
yeah, thanks for being part of it.
yeah, thanking you for your time. It's much appreciated.
Right.